In a world where the aviation industry has long been dominated by powerful corporations and a lack of diversity, Sarah Williams emerged as a trailblazer, a woman who not only dreamed of something bigger but worked tirelessly to make that dream a reality. Co-founder of Eclipse Airlines, Sarah's journey is one of overcoming adversity, navigating systemic obstacles, and creating a space for those who had long been overlooked in an industry that has traditionally been exclusive. Born into a world where the odds were stacked against her, Sarah never allowed her circumstances to define her. From a young age, she understood the power of perseverance and the importance of breaking down the barriers that had been placed before her. Growing up in a community that was underrepresented in the aviation field, she became acutely aware of the lack of role models who looked like her. But instead of succumbing to frustration, she used that awareness as fuel to drive her forward. She began her career in aviation with a singular vision: to build a company that not only provided excellent service, but also reflected the diversity of the world it served. Sarah saw an opportunity to reshape the industry, not just in terms of its services, but in its representation. She wanted Eclipse Airlines to be a place where every person, whether they were an employee or a passenger, felt welcome, valued, and respected. But the road to success was anything but easy. The aviation industry, like many others, has often struggled with inclusivity. Women and people of color have been historically underrepresented in top leadership roles, and Sarah faced pushback from those who couldn't see the value in changing the status quo. There were times when she doubted herself, when the weight of being one of the few black women in the room felt overwhelming. But instead of retreating, she leaned into her purpose, knowing that her success would mean more than just personal achievement. It would be proof that anyone, regardless of their background, could defy expectations and succeed. With tireless determination, Sarah built Eclipse Airlines into a powerhouse, one that is not just about profit, but about the people it serves. She implemented policies that ensured equal opportunity for employees regardless of race, gender, or background. Under her leadership, Eclipse became known for its commitment to inclusivity, not just in hiring practices, but in how it treated its passengers. From multilingual staff to accessibility features that made flying easier for people with disabilities, every detail was considered through the lens of respect and fairness. Sarah's leadership goes far beyond business. It is a call to action. In an industry where it's easy to overlook the importance of diversity, Sarah Williams has proven that inclusion isn't just the right thing to do. It's good for business. By embracing diversity, she has built a company that is not only profitable, but beloved by its employees and customers alike. Sarah's legacy is one of hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that true success is measured not just by financial gain, but by the impact you have on the world around you. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that change is possible, but it requires courage, vision, and a relentless pursuit of equality. As she continues to break down barriers in the aviation industry, Sarah Williams is teaching us all that we have the power to create the future we want to see. What do you think is the most important quality a leader must have to foster inclusivity within their company? Conflict at the airport, a moment of unwarranted prejudice. Even after achieving great success as a co-founder of Eclipse Airlines, Sarah Williams knew that her journey was far from free of obstacles. Success, it seemed, didn't always shield her from the prejudices that lingered beneath the surface of society, ready to emerge when least expected. This reality hit her on one particularly trying day at the airport. Despite her status and reputation in the aviation world, Sarah found herself facing a distressing encounter with Karen Peterson, a struggling gate agent at Eclipse Airlines. Karen, who had been going through personal turmoil and facing challenges in her own life, was having a particularly difficult day. In an unfortunate turn of events, Sarah, a high-status passenger with a first-class ticket, found herself at the center of an unjust confrontation with Karen, who began questioning the legitimacy of Sarah's travel arrangements. As Sarah approached the gate, Karen's sharp eyes fixed on her ticket, and without any reasonable explanation, she began to challenge its authenticity. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Karen asked, her tone sharp and dismissive. Sarah, accustomed to navigating airports, explained her ticket without a hint of frustration, but Karen's demeanor only escalated from there. Karen's questioning went from merely suspicious to outright hostile. "I don't think you belong in this section," Karen muttered, her voice tinged with something Sarah could only describe as condescension. Sarah, calmly asserting her rights, politely reminded Karen that she was in the correct seat, an action that only seemed to provoke Karen further. The situation took an even more uncomfortable turn when Karen, without any valid cause, called for airport security. The whole scene felt absurd. Sarah Williams, a successful entrepreneur and the co-founder of the airline, being treated as though she didn't belong in a space she had every right to be in. It wasn't just about a ticket. It was about something deeper. The biases that Sarah, despite her accomplishments, still had to face as a black woman in a high-status position. In the face of it all, Sarah remained composed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't react with anger. Instead, she stood firm in her conviction, fully aware that she had earned her place, but also understanding that Karen's behavior wasn't just about her. It was reflective of the broader societal issues that still persisted. Security, after all, arrived only to find that there was no cause for concern. Sarah's ticket was legitimate, and the encounter was a product of unnecessary prejudice, not a legitimate security risk. A lesson in resilience and compassion. As security de-escalated the situation, Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing. She could feel the sting of injustice, but she refused to let it define her. In that moment, she realized something. Karen wasn't the enemy. The true enemy was the deep-rooted prejudice that allowed incidents like this to happen in the first place. The biases that even well-meaning individuals might unknowingly carry with them. Rather than responding with anger or disdain, Sarah chose to use the moment as a teaching opportunity. Instead of walking away, she gently addressed Karen, offering a few words of understanding about how bias could sometimes cloud judgment. "I understand that we all go through difficult times," Sarah said, her voice calm and empathetic. "But we can't allow our personal struggles to cause us to treat others unfairly. I've worked hard to be here, just as everyone else has worked hard to be in their position. We all deserve respect." It was a moment of tension that Sarah, in her wisdom, transformed into a lesson in human dignity. As she left the gate, she could only hope that Karen might reflect on her behavior and understand the impact of her actions. After all, it wasn't just about her own dignity. It was about changing the narrative for future generations of women, particularly women of color, who would face similar challenges. Reflecting on the bigger picture, Sarah's experience at the airport serves as a poignant reminder that no matter how high one rises, prejudice can always find its way into even the most mundane situations. But what mattered was how Sarah chose to respond. She didn't let the actions of one individual dictate her self-worth or derail her mission of inclusivity. The situation also highlights the importance of empathy and understanding in confronting biases, especially when they manifest in places where power dynamics are at play. Karen's behavior was a reflection of the struggles she faced, but it also revealed how societal biases could inadvertently seep into professional settings. The encounter wasn't just about the clash between two individuals. It was a reminder that real change doesn't happen overnight, and that every encounter presents an opportunity to challenge stereotypes and build a more respectful and inclusive world. Have you ever experienced prejudice in a situation where you expected to be respected? How did you handle it? Confrontation and public exposure. The power of social media. As security arrived at the gate, the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah stood tall, remaining composed as the officer quickly verified her credentials. Within moments, the truth was undeniable. Her ticket was legitimate. The confrontation was a product of unfounded suspicion, not a security threat. But the situation didn't end there. As the officer quietly assured Karen that everything was in order, a bystander who had been watching the scene unfold stepped forward. A phone was raised, capturing the entire incident. What might have been dismissed as a brief encounter in the hustle of airport life was now immortalized on film, a stark reminder of how prejudice can manifest in everyday moments. Within hours, the video of Sarah's encounter with Karen spread across social media. It went viral, quickly amassing millions of views and sparking a wave of public outrage. People from all over the world watched in disbelief as Sarah, a successful black woman, was unjustly questioned and treated with disrespect by an airport employee. The video painted a vivid picture of racial bias, and the response was immediate and loud. Social media platforms became flooded with comments demanding justice and accountability. Many expressed their anger at the treatment Sarah received, while others shared personal stories of similar incidents where they had faced discrimination in places they should have been treated with respect. The hashtag Justice for Sarah trended for days as more and more voices joined the conversation. NATHA, the ripple effect, a call for change. As the video continued to spread, it ignited a much larger conversation about racial bias, prejudice in professional spaces, and the power dynamics that often shape those interactions. The public outcry was not just about one incident. It was a reflection of the systemic issues that continue to plague everyday encounters, even for those at the top of their careers. The conversation shifted beyond the airport gates. It extended to corporate boardrooms, social media discussions, and community meetings. People everywhere were questioning how society could allow such blatant acts of discrimination to continue unchecked. The viral video became a catalyst for wider conversations about how race and status often intersect in moments of injustice. For Sarah, the exposure was both empowering and painful. While she appreciated the widespread support, it was still a stark reminder of how people of color, especially women, continue to face obstacles simply for existing in spaces that others deem off-limits. However, rather than feeling defeated, Sarah used the moment to fuel her passion for change. In interviews and public statements, Sarah spoke about the significance of this incident, not just for herself, but for countless others who had experienced similar microaggressions. She refused to let Karen's actions define her, choosing instead to focus on the broader message of equality and justice. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about every person who's ever been made to feel less than. It's about challenging the systems that perpetuate these biases and fighting for a world where we all are treated with respect." Turning pain into purpose. The viral video may have been an unexpected turn in Sarah's journey, but it became a powerful platform to continue her advocacy. She began speaking at events, sharing her story with audiences far and wide. The incident, once a source of personal frustration, had now become an opportunity to further the conversation on inclusivity and the importance of challenging biases, even in the smallest of interactions. Sarah's resolve was unshaken. With the support of the public and allies from all walks of life, she was able to push forward her mission of creating more equitable spaces, both within the aviation industry and beyond. What had begun as a painful moment of prejudice transformed into a movement for justice, making Sarah's voice even more influential in the fight for systemic change. The power of public exposure. This incident is a prime example of the power of social media in shaping public opinion and sparking necessary debates. While the video of Sarah's encounter was deeply uncomfortable to watch, it was also a necessary reminder of the work still left to be done in dismantling prejudiced systems. In the end, it was the courage of bystanders, the power of technology, and the determination of Sarah Williams herself that turned a moment of unfair treatment into an international call for justice. How do you think viral videos of incidents like this can contribute to lasting change in society? Aftermath and reflection. The ripple of change. The aftermath of the viral video was swift and powerful. What had started as an unfortunate incident at the airport soon evolved into a significant public reckoning. The video, which captured the unjust treatment of Sarah Williams, sparked widespread discussions about racial bias in corporate America, particularly in industries where power dynamics often go unchecked. People began reflecting on the biases they themselves might carry, and the conversation about racial equity grew louder with each passing day. As the video went viral, the fallout for Karen Peterson was inevitable. The attention on her actions was undeniable, and the company had no choice but to take swift action. After an internal investigation, Karen faced consequences at work. She was placed on administrative leave pending further review. The airline, aware of the negative publicity surrounding the incident, made it clear that they took racial discrimination seriously and would hold their employees accountable for any inappropriate behavior. The path to personal growth. But the impact of the incident went deeper than just professional consequences for Karen. Recognizing that this situation was about more than just one isolated event, Karen was encouraged to undergo personal reflection. The airline arranged for her to participate in diversity and inclusion training, and acknowledging her personal struggles and the underlying factors that contributed to her behavior, suggested that she seek therapy to confront her biases. The therapy, initially met with resistance, eventually became an eye-opening experience for Karen. She began to recognize how her own struggles, her feelings of inadequacy and lack of control, had manifested in prejudiced behavior towards Sarah. This journey of personal growth was difficult for Karen, but it was also an important reminder that accountability doesn't just stop at professional consequences. It must extend into the personal realm if real change is to take place. Karen's story is not just about the wrong she did, but also about the steps she took to understand herself and make amends. It's a reminder that people are capable of growth and change, even when it seems difficult. Sarah's advocacy, turning the incident into a movement. For Sarah, the incident was both a painful reminder and an opportunity for action. She could have easily walked away, choosing to let the episode remain a moment in time. But instead, Sarah chose to turn the pain into purpose. Supported by her loving husband, Michael, who had always been a pillar of strength for her, Sarah channeled the public attention into advocacy for systemic change, particularly within the airline industry. She began speaking at conferences, writing op-eds, and using her platform to raise awareness about racial bias and discrimination in corporate environments. Sarah's focus wasn't just on what had happened to her. It was about creating lasting change that would ensure no one else would have to face similar prejudices. She worked with diversity consultants, pushing the airline industry to implement more robust anti-discrimination policies, including mandatory unconscious bias training for all employees. Her efforts also led to the creation of a mentorship program designed to uplift underrepresented groups in aviation, from flight attendants to pilots, with the goal of increasing diversity in leadership positions. Sarah's message was clear. Inclusion wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. It was about creating an environment where everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background, could thrive. She tirelessly campaigned for policies that would support equitable treatment, not just for passengers, but for employees across the airline industry. Her work was met with resistance from some corners of the industry, but the overwhelming support from employees, activists, and the general public kept her moving forward. Sarah knew that changing an entire industry wasn't easy. It took time, dedication, and the willingness to challenge the status quo. The power of reflection and action. The events surrounding that fateful day at the airport left a profound mark on both Sarah and Karen, though in very different ways. For Karen, the journey was one of self-examination, facing uncomfortable truths and seeking to repair the harm she had caused. For Sarah, it was a moment of reflection that turned into a call for action, one that challenged the industry she helped build and pushed for greater inclusivity, equality, and respect. The aftermath of the incident proved that no single action, whether it's a viral video or a moment of prejudice, exists in a vacuum. It becomes a spark, igniting conversations and change that resonate far beyond the individuals involved. Sarah's response, rooted in resilience and determination, made it clear that the fight for justice was ongoing, and she would not stop until the world saw the changes she knew were necessary. Questions for the audience. What kind of changes do you believe need to happen in corporate America to ensure inclusivity and equality in the workplace? Corporate response and reforms. A turning point for Eclipse Airlines. The fallout from the viral incident at the airport was felt not only by Sarah Williams and Karen Peterson, but also by Eclipse Airlines, the company at the heart of the controversy. The public outcry following the video of Sarah's mistreatment was overwhelming, and the company knew that swift action was necessary to preserve its reputation and demonstrate its commitment to equity and inclusion. Eclipse Airlines immediately launched an internal investigation to understand the full scope of the situation and determine appropriate consequences. The investigation revealed the depth of Karen Peterson's actions, which had not only led to the unjust treatment of Sarah, but had also highlighted a larger issue of racial bias within certain sectors of the company. As a result, Karen was placed on administrative leave while the investigation continued. Though the company had policies in place, it was clear that Eclipse Airlines needed to do more to ensure such incidents wouldn't happen again. Recognizing this, the leadership of Eclipse Airlines publicly acknowledged the need for change, especially in how the company handled discrimination, bias, and its commitment to inclusivity. Mandatory diversity training and inclusivity protocols. The airline's first step was to implement mandatory diversity training for all employees. The training went beyond the usual modules. It was comprehensive, including not only racial and gender sensitivity, but also education on unconscious bias, microaggressions, and how to foster an inclusive environment. The training sought to address the root causes of discrimination and instill values of respect and empathy in every employee. The decision wasn't just about policy. It was about creating a cultural shift within the company. Eclipse Airlines brought in diversity experts, psychologists, and industry leaders to lead these training sessions, ensuring that employees at all levels had the tools and understanding to recognize and address biases in real time. Sarah herself, having experienced the very prejudice the training aimed to prevent, was invited to speak at some of the training sessions, sharing her experience and the importance of respect and dignity in all professional interactions. Alongside the diversity training, the airline introduced new inclusivity protocols, including a more transparent process for handling complaints of discrimination. Employees and passengers alike were now encouraged to report any instances of bias or unfair treatment without fear of retaliation. A dedicated team was established to handle these complaints, ensuring they were addressed quickly and fairly. Sarah had long advocated for systems that would allow people to speak out without fear. and this was a significant step toward creating that safe space within Eclipse Airlines. Eclipse also rolled out a series of initiatives designed to enhance inclusivity in their hiring and promotion processes. The airline actively sought to recruit more diverse talent across all levels, from flight attendants to senior executives. As part of the new protocols, the company set goals for increasing diversity in leadership roles, which had traditionally been dominated by a narrow demographic. A culture shift, from reaction to proaction. While the public response to the incident was important, the real work for Eclipse Airlines began behind the scenes. The company realized that addressing the symptoms of discrimination was not enough. Systemic change was needed to eliminate biases from the core of its operations. The reforms that followed the incident weren't merely reactive. They were proactive steps toward creating an airline culture where inclusion wasn't just a buzzword, but a fundamental value. The changes weren't without their challenges. Resistance to change often arises when deep-seated habits and attitudes are questioned. But Sarah's voice, as a co-founder and advocate for change, provided the moral backbone for the initiative. She continued to push for a more transparent, fair, and respectful airline culture. Eclipse Airlines, now in the midst of a cultural overhaul, began to prioritize inclusivity in every decision, from customer service to internal practices. The company's response to the incident also extended to a broader commitment to corporate social responsibility. Eclipse Airlines pledged to partner with community organizations, particularly those focused on racial and gender equality, to further its mission of building an inclusive society. The ripple effect, a model for the industry. Eclipse Airlines' bold response to the incident set a new standard in the industry. As the airline began implementing these significant reforms, other companies in the aviation sector took notice. Industry leaders were watching closely, recognizing that the way Eclipse Airlines handled this public relations crisis could either strengthen or weaken its position in the market. Sarah's dedication to transforming the industry from within turned Eclipse into a model for how corporations could lead the charge towards systemic change. The airline's commitment to inclusivity and its transparent handling of discrimination cases became a beacon of hope for those who had long been marginalized in the aviation world. Sarah's efforts were not just about elevating Eclipse Airlines, they were about elevating the industry as a whole. By publicly advocating for reform, Sarah helped shift the conversation about corporate responsibility, employee treatment, and customer care. What had begun as a painful confrontation became the catalyst for a transformative movement in aviation. A lasting legacy of change. In the months following the incident, the changes within Eclipse Airlines were palpable. The company's commitment to inclusivity became a hallmark of its brand, attracting employees and customers who shared those values. The reforms didn't stop at training and policy changes. They fostered a broader culture of empathy and understanding, which was reflected in the airline's operations and customer experiences. For Sarah, the fight for justice was far from over. She continued to use her platform to advocate for change, not only within her own company, but also across industries. She knew that the path to equality and respect was ongoing, but with every small victory, she was one step closer to building the world she envisioned. How can employees contribute to fostering a culture of inclusivity in their workplaces? Personal growth and redemption, a path toward change. The fallout from the viral incident was a turning point for both Karen Peterson and Sarah Williams. While Sarah's journey was one of advocacy and systemic change, Karen found herself on a deeply personal path of growth and redemption, one that would require confronting her own biases and understanding the true impact of her actions. For Karen, the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of professional consequences and public scrutiny. But as she was forced to step back and reflect on her behavior, She realized the incident had been a wake-up call. She recognized that her actions had not only harmed Sarah, but had also reinforced toxic biases she had held for years. More than just a regrettable moment, the incident forced Karen to ask herself some difficult questions. Why did I act the way I did? Where did these prejudices come from? How can I change and grow from this? In the months following the incident, Karen sought therapy and began a journey of deep personal reflection. One of the first things she did was reach out to her daughter, a young woman who had been a silent observer of Karen's struggles with bias and self-worth. Karen knew that her actions had caused harm, but she also understood that her relationship with her daughter was a casualty of her own unresolved issues. Karen began the difficult task of rebuilding their bond, acknowledging the mistakes she had made, not only as an employee, but as a mother. Karen's conversations with her daughter were often filled with painful admissions and apologies. But through those discussions, Karen began to understand how the biases she held, often subtle, sometimes unrecognized, had shaped her relationship with her family. She worked hard to open up, to listen, and to create space for her daughter's perspective. It was a long road, but slowly, trust was rebuilt. Karen's journey toward redemption wasn't linear. There were days when the weight of her past mistakes felt too heavy to bear. But as she persisted in her personal growth, Karen began to see that true change was a lifelong commitment. By confronting her flaws head-on, she started to transform herself, not just for her daughter, but for the people around her. She recognized that while redemption didn't erase the harm done, it could offer the chance to make amends and create a better future. Sarah's transformation into a public advocate, leading the charge for change. For Sarah Williams, the viral incident at the airport was a catalyst for a public transformation. Though she had always been a champion of inclusivity and equality, the moment she found herself in the public eye opened new avenues for her to make a lasting impact. As the viral video spread, Sarah became a symbol of resilience, not just in the face of racial bias, but in the fight for justice across all industries. The backlash against Karen Peterson gave Sarah an opportunity to push for broader societal change. Sarah understood that her journey wasn't just about her own experience. It was about making sure the world understood the systemic issues that allowed racial injustice to persist. With her personal story at the forefront, Sarah was invited to deliver keynote speeches at conferences, universities, and corporate summits. Her message was clear. Racial bias is not an isolated incident, but a deeply rooted issue in many sectors of society, including the workplace. And it's up to all of us to address it, both individually and institutionally. Sarah's words resonated with audiences far and wide. She spoke not only about the emotional toll of racism, but also about the tangible, practical steps companies and individuals could take to combat bias and promote inclusivity. Through her speeches, Sarah called for businesses to implement more robust diversity training, create transparent systems for addressing complaints, and most importantly, embrace policies that promoted fairness for all employees, regardless of their background. Beyond her speeches, Sarah led several initiatives aimed at systemic change. She worked closely with organizations dedicated to racial equity, collaborating with them to create programs that uplifted marginalized voices within the corporate world. She helped launch mentorship programs designed to support people of color entering leadership roles in various industries, believing that representation at the top was critical to bringing about lasting change. Sarah's advocacy didn't stop at the corporate level. She worked with local communities, engaging with grassroots organizations and activists to address racial injustice in all its forms. She knew that change wasn't just about laws and policies. It was about shifting hearts and minds and empowering those who had been silenced for far too long. The intersection of personal growth and public action. As both Karen and Sarah embarked on their respective journeys, their paths became intertwined, each influencing the other in ways that neither could have anticipated. Karen's redemption arc showed that even those who have made mistakes, sometimes deeply harmful ones, have the capacity to grow and change. In Sarah, Karen saw the embodiment of what it meant to rise above adversity, to turn personal pain into a call for societal transformation. For Sarah, Karen's journey of growth offered hope that true change was possible, not just on a societal level, but within individuals themselves. It served as a reminder that the fight for justice wasn't only about exposing systemic wrongdoing, it was also about offering opportunities for reflection, understanding, and growth, even for those who had been part of the problem. Together, their stories became a powerful testament to the transformative power of both personal and collective action. Sarah's public advocacy work created ripples of change in industries around the world, while Karen's personal redemption story illustrated the power of confronting one's biases and striving for better. What are the most effective ways to foster personal growth and redemption after a mistake, especially when it has harmed others? Sarah's story is not just one of personal triumph, but also a beacon of hope and change. Her courage ignited a ripple effect, inspiring corporate reforms that emphasize inclusivity and accountability. She has become a living testament to the fact that one individual can push for change in a world that often resists it. But her work doesn't stop with boardroom policies or industry shifts. Sarah's story sparks deeper societal conversations about bias, prejudice, and systemic discrimination, conversations that were long overdue. Her ability to stand tall in the face of adversity challenges each of us to reflect on our own biases and consider how we can collectively create a more just world. It's not just about corporate initiatives, it's about personal responsibility. Sarah encourages us to hold ourselves accountable, to recognize the power we each have in shaping the culture around us, and to ask ourselves, how can I contribute to this change? Her advocacy becomes a call to action for each of us to not only speak out, but also take tangible steps toward creating an equitable environment for all. Her resilience shines through every step of her journey, symbolizing the ongoing fight for equality. While the world continues to evolve, Sarah's voice remains unwavering, calling for justice. Her impact echoes far beyond the walls of Eclipse Airlines. It lives in every conversation, every policy reform, and every individual who dares to stand for what's right. As we reflect on Sarah's journey, let's ask ourselves, are we listening to the voices that challenge the status quo? And what actions can we take today to further the cause of equality and justice in our own communities? Thank you for watching and supporting Story Karam. Stay tuned, and let's continue this journey together.